All right, so I guess it's time to get officially started. It's a warm welcome to all of you. The session, as you know, is being recorded with the agreement of the panelists and will be uploaded after some editing on our website. And so let me share now the presentation, the short presentation of this webinar as well as the series. So we are today in the fourth webinar of this series on management research evaluation. And the webinar today is devoted to one of the different stakeholder groups that are very important in our field, in the field of management research, which is government agencies. As you know, in this series, we are addressing or convening different representatives of different groups of stakeholders. And as I will mention a bit later on, with a particular purpose of arriving to a better understanding of the situation and possibly a statement of soft policy by the Federation. So welcome again on behalf of Alqueta Pecci, Ampat, president, the president of the Brazilian Association. And this session will have presentations by the different panelists, 6 minutes each. And this session will have presentations by the different panelists, 6 minutes each for their initial statement, so that we should leave ample time for a Q&A after that. However, I encourage all the participants to freely use the chat to share their comments and questions as we go along. And the chat is also edited and made available in our website. We have experienced that indeed, as probably most of us using Zoom know, there's very fruitful information also that can be exchanged through the Zoom chat. And this then has the advantage of not limiting contributions to the Q&A time, which is always limited. The co-chairs will be monitoring, we will be monitoring the chat and identifying also questions and comments that might be of interest to be brought into the conversation. So as I said, we'll hope that we'll have enough time for Q&A, and hopefully we'll have also a few minutes to close the seminar, the webinar, with kind of a conclusion for today's session. Let me now tell you a little bit about the Federation. For those of you who don't know it, the Federation was created 30 years ago in 1990 at the initiative of Professor Ernst Halbach from Germany, and currently has 17 members with a couple of observer members. And you can see here the geographical reach of the Federation. We are obviously trying to do even better, to try to have better coverage of all the different academies. We're very happy that academies from Africa have recently joined us, and we're working also on getting more organizations from different continents to get into the Federation. What is the Federation for? Well, in the statutes, you can read that our mission is to advance business and management research, teaching, and practice throughout the world. And when we talk or speak about management, it's really from a broad understanding of this notion, encompassing all the different subfields, going from operations, logistics, marketing, accounting, finance, HR, strategy, and business ethics, for instance. But so all the fields are welcome to be represented in the Federation, which is a federation of scholarly associations of management, only associations, not individuals. In relationship to today's session, I would like to mention one specific goal that it's mentioned in the mission, to provide direct benefits to our member associations, but also their individual members, is that the Federation already since its inception aims at establishing and maintaining standards of competence in the areas of management research, education, and practice, taking a contextualized perspective. That is to say, we should be very careful that when we say standards, we don't mean one only way, but precisely the statutes mention the importance of taking a contextualized perspective and recognize the cultural and intellectual diversity throughout the world. So this webinar series is actually the first, probably the first reflection, the first instance of the pursuit of this particular goal of our mission, that is to reflect about the current state of management research in the world. And this was triggered, as you might have read, by the Financial Times 50 List survey, which led the executive committee of IFSAM to launch this webinar series to provide a forum to give voice to and engage in a dialogue among different perspectives to reflect, as I said, about the current management research system across the world, containing issues such as how research is defined, what are the different research publication formats which are considered and valued by the different stakeholders, what are the current systems and practices of management research, how well the current systems of research evaluation are actually performing, and so what are the necessary changes, if any. The series consists of 5 webinars, 1 per month, and they started, as you might have seen, in January. And as I mentioned already, each of them is designed to give the voice to a different stakeholder group. So far, we have addressed or heard the voices of associations, scholarly associations leaders, university presidents and school deans, journal editors, and editors of publishing houses. And today, the session is devoted to government officers, and representatives of the government agencies. And we will finish in May 20th with the 5th and last, which will also contain representatives of practitioners, both in the public sector and in the private sector, with the aim to actually release a statement, position statement of the Council of the Federation regarding the current system and possible changes that should be made. So the final webinar on May 20th, before moving to today, just for those of you who might not have seen it in our social media or website, we'll have this list of participants, which you can see come from different parts of the world and represent different kinds of stakeholder groups, all the stakeholder groups that we have mentioned before, including the Financial Times. Hopefully, Andrew Jag, the editor for global education in charge of the ranking and the survey, will be also with us, at least for part of it. And this webinar will be co-chaired with the president of the Africa Academy of Management, David Suga. So today, as you might have seen, we have quite, again, a distinguished and a relatively long list of panelists. So that's why their time is limited. We provided a list of questions. They're quite extensive, but we obviously told them to focus on those 2 or 3 topics that they thought were most relevant for the current dynamics in the organizations that they are representing today. Unfortunately, the representative from the Brazilian agency, from CAPES, was not able to join us. So very generously, Professor Pecci has agreed to share with us her view on that. And this is the order, the sequence that we have proposed, because Mr. Cormack actually has to attend to other business later on. And so we are actually starting with him. So I'm going to give now the floor to my colleague. These are the questions that we gave the panelists that they have had. So we will hear them about these issues. So now back to my colleague my co-chair, Professor Alqueta Pecci. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Xavier. I would not take too much time I would leave the floor for our presenters today, but I would like to appreciate Xavier and all the team leaderships on putting together these seminars with very relevant stakeholders for the advancement of management research in many countries of the world. And I would also like to thank also Claudia, who is joining us with today. Claudia is the scientific director of Ampat, the Brazilian Academy of Management, As Xavier said, we already gathered 5,000 members. We have big conferences of thousands of people in Brazil. And I'm very glad that IFSAM has such a diversified view of management, not focusing on just one place or region, but taking into account this diversity of management research, training, and education all over the world. So I'm looking forward to all your to our talk today, and I hope we can learn by our sharing our experiences in this conversation. Thank you very much, Xavier.
You're all welcome, very welcome. Muito obrigado, Alqueta. So, as I said, we will start. Maybe, Alqueta, we can take turns introducing the speakers. So I'll start with Henry Cormack, who, as I already said, he is a director for the UK Research and Innovation Agency. So I guess, actually, he's the head of appraisal and evaluation team. So Henry, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can I just start by checking people can hear me? Excellent. In that case, good afternoon, everyone. And can I just start by saying thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a really interesting topic, and I'm very pleased to be part of the discussion. By way of introduction, my name's Henry Cormack. I'm a senior economist at an organisation called UK Research and Innovation, which is the UK government's research and innovation funding arm and covers all the academic disciplines and the business sectors right across the UK. I will start by saying I am not an expert in the latest trends around evaluating management research per se, but in my current role, I head up a team of analysts that are involved in evaluating research programs across the full range of academic disciplines. And I think many of the issues that relate to evaluating management research also apply to how we evaluate other research disciplines. So I'm hoping that I'm able to provide an interesting perspective today, despite being perhaps less close to some of the specific issues around evaluating management research. I'll also just briefly say that previously I've worked in various roles within the UK's Government Economic Service. And as part of that, I've done work on policy areas like transport, local government, environment, climate change, immigration. And generally speaking, my expertise and interests lie in cost-benefit analysis, appraisal, and evaluation. So, among the preset questions that were shared with the panel members for today's event were a few questions about my organisation's view on things like journal impact factors and DORA and open access. So I thought I'd start just by addressing those points head on, because the answers are actually quite straightforward in my case. So, UKRI, my organisation, is a signatory to DORA, so that's the Declaration on Research Assessment. And I don't think there's anything in the DORA declaration that we have really had any hesitation signing up to. I think it's a very sensible and long overdue statement about how research evaluation should be carried out, and I very much welcome it. By definition, therefore, we are also opposed to the use of journal impact factors in virtually all, if not all, contexts for the reasons that DORA sets out. And then when it comes to open access, we are very much committed to the principle of open access in research. And as an organisation, we're currently in the process of setting out a renewed overall policy statement on open access, which hopefully we'll be consulting on in the next few weeks. So that's where my organisation stands on those particular issues. I wanted to then, if I may, share my own personal perspective on some evaluation issues and try and relate these to management research. And I want to do that by initially making a slightly provocative statement and say that I think that for a very long time now, the research evaluation community as a whole has been far too preoccupied with counting publications and citations as a way of measuring the impact of research. Now, I'm absolutely not going to make an argument today that citation scores don't mean anything and should be ignored. I don't think that at all. Bibliometric analysis plays a very important role in many of the evaluations that my organisation undertakes and that I'm involved in. But for someone like me who's paid really to assess, or at least try and assess in a way that's somewhat robust, how research and innovation has improved people's lives, citation scores really don't tell you very much about that. And I think when it comes to management research, I'm far more interested in the role that management research can play in explaining differences in economic productivity between different countries and evaluating whether and how the latest management research on that topic has actually influenced businesses or public policy makers to do things differently. And my interest in this stems partly from the fact that I'm an economist. I've previously worked on productivity when I was at the UK Treasury briefly, but also because I live in a country, the UK, whose productivity very famously extremely lags behind its closest competitors, including the likes of France, Germany, and the US. And there are lots of really interesting studies out there which try and identify what explains the UK's poor productivity. And, you know, lots of interesting theories about tax and regulatory environment, the UK's education system, and other things. But the one thing I've always found very compelling as a hypothesis is that the UK's poor productivity has at least something to do with bad management practices. And so when it comes to evaluating the impact of management research, my take on this is, given how much of an incentive both businesses and policymakers, how much of an incentive they have to engage with management research to inform better policies and behaviours to drive productivity, particularly in the UK where it's such a well-known problem, I think far more interesting than citations of academic publications are some of these metrics that are starting to become a lot more used in evaluation, like the number of times that government policy agencies have used a particular piece of research, or the use of management research in business decision-making. So again, being slightly provocative, admittedly, I am far less interested in a piece of management research that's been cited 100 times by other management researchers than I am in a piece of management research that's been cited just once by, say, the Bank of England or the National Health Service. So that's my sort of broad take on that. I'd very much welcome a conversation and a debate around some of these points. I think I've probably run out of time. I was told to keep this to 5 minutes. I was told if you can't sum up in a couple of sentences, an alternative approach is to finish with a question. So I'm going to pose a question now, which is to ask you, as management research professionals, what do you think is the best way to evaluate whether management research has had impact beyond the academic sphere? I'd really like to hear what you have to say about that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for having me along today.
You're welcome, Henry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the provocative questions. Actually, in the last prior webinar with editors-in-chief of journals and publishers, this was a critical issue that we discussed, how to measure what people now call impact, both in management and in public policy, previously called relevance. And in the way of transitioning to the next speaker, let me before introduce or greet two distinguished members of the audience. First of all, Professor Sandro Castaldo, who is president of the Italian Academy of Management. Benvenuto, Sandro. And also Andrew Jack, the editor for global education from the Financial Times, that has very kindly been attending our webinars and was a speaker in the first and also will be in the last. So I guess now we will try to answer your questions, hopefully through the presentations. Today, actually, as I mentioned, the speakers are very kindly asked to speak on behalf of the organizations they represent, which are government agencies or commissions, and how these bodies are actually thinking about these issues. So obviously, the commissions or councils, which are composed by academics, I guess we'll take an academic view, but there are also, I guess, the view of the government. So Alketa, would you like to do the honors for the next speaker? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Henry. You already paved the floor for interesting discussion and debates that we facing also in Brazil. I'd like to introduce now Marc Bonnet, representing France, and we welcome you, Marc, for your discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll share the screen. wherever possible. And meanwhile, thank you, Alketa, and thank you so much also to Stéphanie Chatelin and Aude de Ville, Stéphanie being the current chair of this French agency, and Aude de Ville being the past chair. Today, I'd like to focus on the second question you asked regarding the broaching the formats and dimensions of scientific management research that are considered at the moment in the French system. Just to let you know, there are two different systems in France, the private and the public schools of management. So in private schools, mostly they focus on they are keen to get the ACSB or EQUIS accreditations, but at the same time, they also have to report to the Ministry of Education to get accreditation of the diploma. And nowadays, they expanded the scope of the criteria by taking into account not only the ranked, the journals in the ranked papers, ranked journals, but book chapters, case studies, grants, and so on. But let's move on to the public schools of management, and their ministry has established an agency going by the name of HCERES, which is a public agency in charge of evaluating research centers. And every 5 years, each and every research center in France of the public schools, they have to report on their achievements and projects. And visiting committees consisting of peers meet on site and debate and interact with the researchers and the deans and all their actors in the school. So those which is interesting is that over the past few years, the criteria have dramatically changed or evolved by taking into account other dimensions than only the ranked papers. In 2015, a first list of research products have been defined by the agency, mapping out a variety of research outcomes and implemented since 2017. So these guidelines are updated each year, and it's all the more important nowadays that as the French Agency for Research, CNRS, has discarded the ranking list in economy and management. So we have the FNEJ list, and Professor Yvon Piqueux is a representative of the FNEJ, and it's quite useful by taking into account not only the English speaking, the English or the Anglo-Saxon journals, but also the French and in the Francophone world. So, as I mentioned, the objective of this scorecard regarding the research, mapping out the variety of activities in terms of research, not only journals, but the list also includes articles that are not peer-reviewed, books, book chapters, academic conferences, workshops, methodological innovations, softwares, expert reports, pedagogic developments, e-learning MOOCs, and dissemination of research towards companies and towards general public. So we expand the scope of the stakeholders of research. And we could observe over the years some positive impacts of these updated or upgraded system. First, improved recognition of the diversity of research practices. So those, let's say, mostly in the past, quantitative research that could be published in journals were taken into account. Not the case, not only the case anymore. We shed light on multidimensional activities of research centers and management scholars. We better balance academic publications and other school research outcomes. So it has positive impacts on the management of the schools themselves, because it improves the pedagogy, the teaching practices, and involving those who were in some of the school considered as, let's say, deadwood. So shedding light or highlighting the publications in French journals. They are taken into account thanks to the FNEJ ranking lists. Very important, because it enables the richness and contextualization of research in the Francophone countries, a lot of countries, and representing an overall 500 million people. So, but of course, there are abstracts or full papers translated into English as well. And also an important change has been the evolution of the role of the peer review visiting committees with enhancement of their role as advisor, not only controlling, but advising and opening new avenues for research in the public schools of management. So debates and foresights, two dimensions that are progressively taken into account more and more: managerial impact and societal impacts. Managerial, the vision, mission of management research, now being really considered as focused on action-taking, decision-making in companies and organizations, the contribution to reflexivity and managerial innovation in complex business environments. And we have examples of those practices of evaluating research, for instance, the BSIS scorecard, the qualimetrics evaluation of the research impacts in companies and organizations, and societal impacts, both internal and external. Internal impacts on the school itself, because expanding the criteria enables favors the professional development of scholars, team working, cross-disciplinary research, and cross-fertilization with teaching practices and so on. And external impacts are more and more taken into account with not only companies and organizations, but at territorial level, society, improving lives, as Henry mentioned earlier, and also the SDGs of the United Nations, standing for the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So we, in the wake of the visit of this agency, we have examples of research centers taking initiatives or experimenting pilots of scorecards that expand the evaluation of research. Example at the EL Lyon School of Management, following the HECRS visit, the objective is for each research scheme or paper or project, analyzing before and after the impact factor, such as H-index and ranking and citations. Well, this is traditional. The managerial index, short and long-term impacts on company overall performance, and we have examples, and then the societal index, both internal and external, with the headings such as faculty professional development, enhancement of cooperation among faculty teams, grading the core competence of the school, and external impacts such as impact on the image of the school, impacts on the companies and organization and territories, and those SDGs we have mentioned. So an evolution towards towards a broader scope of evaluation. So thank you for attention, and thank you for those who have contributed to this breakthrough.
Merci beaucoup, Marc. Thank you so much. Before giving, I guess, the floor to the next speaker, let me also welcome other STEAM members of the Federation, the President of the British Academy of Management, Professor Nick Beach, as well as the Secretary of the Federation, Professor Arabella Mocchiaro, who is also Secretary of the Italian Association, and the other council representative of CIMA at IFSAM, Professor Lara Prenko. So welcome all. Thank you so much for being with us. So I guess the next speaker, actually, it's very fitting because it's Professor Daniele Dalli, who is our speaker as a former member of the Italian Agency for Evaluation of Research, ANVUR, and also current editor of the Italian Journal of Marketing. The floor is yours, Daniele.
Thank you, Javier, and thank you for inviting me to join this extraordinary panel of colleagues. First of all, I have to make just a slight correction about my role. I am still member of the National Agency for the Evaluation of Universities and Research Centers, and specifically, I am a member of the panel that is actually evaluating journals in order to give scholars a list of so-called A-class journals they have to publish in order to get credits for national habilitation. But I will come to this just in a while. I would like to focus on two things in this first speech. The first one is what the agency is doing at the moment in Italy. And the second one is how to evaluate the quality of scientific research, and especially what do we have to do with bibliometric data, as some of my colleagues have just discussed before. First of all, in Italy, at the moment, we call it ANVUR. I can link the website in the chat here on the right. The agency has its own staff made of professionals and people dealing with research evaluation, and also rely upon panels made by academics, as the one in which I am involved. The first activity that is actually is working now is the sort of research assessment of universities and research centers. The main tool for this is just evaluating research products, basically books, book chapters, and journal articles. This kind of evaluation is aimed at evaluating individual products, not for the sake of evaluating individual researchers, but for evaluating the structure to which they belong, that is universities, departments, and also CNR, that is more or less the same as CNRS in France, that is the parallel research organization that deals with research. The second activity in which I am more directly involved is the national habilitation. National habilitation is a sort of prerequisite for scholars that want to apply for positions of associate or full professorships at the local level, in the sense that you have to have an habilitation in order to apply for these positions. In order to apply for habilitation, you have to have certain products. You have to have a given number of papers published in A-class journals, a certain number of book chapters or articles, even if not necessarily on A-class journals. You have to have a certain number of books. And this is a sort of ex ante criteria. If you have this stuff, you can get the habilitation evaluation, and there is a committee that will deal with analyzing more in detail your scientific production and say if you can be habilitated or not. Okay. In this process, my role as member of one of these committees, especially the one that is engaged in economics, statistics, management, and economic history, we have to make a selection and updating the selection of A-class journals that are offered to scholars as opportunities to publish in order to get this kind of metrics to apply for the habilitation. So in this sense, I'm very much involved in the academic side of research evaluation, and the purpose for this kind of activities is just oriented toward recruitment and the careers of academics. So I can't say much about social or public or business aspects of research evaluation. And my second point is about measuring impact. I think that in Italy we had a very strong increase in productivity recently. By productivity, I mean the growth of per capita articles published by Italian scholars. I can show you very briefly a chart that I derived from Scopus that holds for my specific sector, that is management. These are, the red bars are the number of articles, papers published year by year in Scopus by those who belong to the same community of management scholars. The dotted line is the number of people within this community, and the dark line here, the dark line is the number of articles, and the red bars is the productivity. That is the number of papers per capita. And as you can see, productivity has increased very much recently. And this could be considered, right, a good point, right? I developed a critical stance towards it because I see that there are kind of dangerous patterns emerging from the way in which academics publish on international journals. I can see this not as an Italian issue. I can see it as an issue at the international level. It has to do with different cultural communities. The main point here is that when we use bibliometric data in order to measure research quality through impact, well, these data are not objective, and they depend very much on the strategies that individuals and groups follow in order to perform their publishing activities. And these strategies sometimes can be considered critically. Multiple authorship often do not depend on actual contribution to papers. Multiple papers with slight differences are often presented and actually published by different journals. Recently, there is a huge rise in special issues that, as you actually know, sometimes are managed in a more kind of domesticated way if compared with ordinary submissions. Co-citation strategies. We can measure the net effect of self-citations or network citations, and we actually see that there are strategies occurring in order to increase the popularity of given products or journals, and also editorial board membership or cross memberships that sometimes are used in order to increase the probability or the likelihood of and the success rate of papers and submissions. So in a way, I think that sometimes the use of bibliometric data can bring into the system some kind of effects of this kind of strategies, and the reliability of actual data is not so high. I mean, the number of products and the number of citations can be considered critically from this perspective. I think that we should integrate bibliometric data with a more direct evaluation of journals' prestige and excellence. And I think that from this perspective, the ranking by the ABS, the so-called academic journal guide, can be a good compromise. I think that in the development of that ranking, both data and expert evaluations are considered and put together. And this can be a kind of filter and sort of protection against the impersonal working of the systems when measured by bibliometric data. A second point is that we should have shorter lists. In Italy, for instance, the list of A-class journals is very long, and this opened the room for a lot of different journals competing with each other in sometimes a schizoid fashion with indirect and negative counter effect and drawbacks. And finally, I think that academic associations could and should play a moral suasion role, more effective, and they should be considered by national agencies in a more direct way in order to give more reliability and authority to the research evaluation effort by the agency. In this sense, the interaction between our panel and the academic associations is very intense, and we do exchange a lot of ideas and updates about how the work is going on in this respect. I think that's all by now. Hope not to waste too much time.
No, I don't think there was a waste, but it's hard to describe the organization, give the perspective of the organization, and one's personal perspective in the 6 minutes. But grazie mille. It's very interesting and also very provocative. And I'm sure we will discuss that. Before giving the floor to Alketa to introduce the next panelist, I should have also greeted Professor Michael Morley, who is a former president of our federation, who just recently stepped out of the executive committee, but who has been twice president of the federation and is still working in several committees of the council ad personam. So welcome, Michael. And now we are, I guess, moving from the south of Europe to the northern Europe again, continental Europe. And so, Alketa, we will come back to the Mediterranean shortly.
Yes, now we'll have Jörg Sido from the German Research Foundation.
Yeah, thank you very much also for inviting me. I think this is a very important discussion and will keep us busy in the academic communities for the years to come. I'm a professor of management at Freie Universität Berlin in Germany, but have been invited, of course, in behalf of my former membership of the review board of the German Research Foundation, DFG. Yeah. There I was a member in the review board for business and economics, together with 3 other colleagues in the field of business studies. And the board includes economics and business studies and business and economic history. The geographical coverage, of course, of the German Research Foundation is Germany. But over the last years, the German Research Foundation has signed many bilateral agreements, among others with their counterparts in Austria, Switzerland, Great Britain, and the Netherlands. On the board, I represented business studies from 2008 to 2012, but since then have been more or less continuously involved in reviewing grant proposals and in some decision committees as well, nationally and internationally. I will talk shortly about 3 points. Yeah. First, about evaluation criteria. If you submit a proposal to the German Research Foundation, what are the criteria? Then very shortly about open access and open science. And lastly, about the idea of how much standardization do we have to expect in research evaluation. First point, evaluation. Yeah, the good and the bad news is, I think, that evaluation criteria have not changed much, even during the pandemic. Yeah, it has pretty much been the same during the last decade or so, and across very different formats of the German Research Foundation, i.e. from young scholar networks, yeah, which have a very small budget, over classical project support for PIs, to larger coordinated programs such as doctoral training schools or collaborative research centers. The criteria have been pretty much the same. And like it or not, yeah, what matters most are peer-reviewed articles in international, and in particular, I must say, US journals. Yeah, they are of overwhelming importance. Yeah, we typically talk about these journals as A or A+ journals. And you may even argue that those who have not published in these journals should not apply for a major grant. Yeah. Like it or don't like it. Yeah, but I think this is still the practice in Germany. Although there is, of course, a little bit of development. Yeah, but before I come to this is how are A and A+ journals established, typically by reference to ABS, the ABS list or the FT50 list, or much more important in my country, our own German style ranking. This was introduced about 10, 12 years ago, yeah, based on an extensive assessment of German journals, including at that time, very importantly, I think, also German journals. Yeah. This is now in the 3.0 version. And interesting enough, our Association of German Management Professors or Business Studies Professors, they have just decided not to introduce the 4.0 version, which has, interestingly, a much more pluralistic approach. Yeah, not only looking at journal publications. Yeah, but it couldn't find the necessary majority. Everybody knows that journal impact factors and journal ratings are problematic. Yeah, and to some extent, this is compensated, of course, by personal citation indexes. Yeah, the H factor, which was mentioned before. I think in the field of business studies in my country, it's not yet as important as in the field of psychology or economics, for instance, but it's gaining more importance. And of course, young researchers who cannot be assessed on these terms, they have a kind of priority with the German Research Foundation. So if you apply for the first time in a life, it's flagged out. This is the first proposal, grant proposal you're submitting. Yeah, and this is dealt in a different way. Yeah, nevertheless, the idea of A and A+ journal publication is important, but not so much the idea of individual citations. Yeah. Of course, I would wish for a more pluralistic approach, like it is spelled out in the DORA agreement. Yeah, but I think this is not yet practice in Germany, and I'm a little bit skeptic that it will really become practice. Yeah, of course, what can be counted will be counted. Yeah, and so in addition to personal citations, you may have the whole list of downloads, of memberships in editorial review boards, presence in media, social media and asocial media, if you like. Yeah, so a broad variety. Yeah. And I personally would like to emphasize that I would favor a trend towards more what I would like to call contingent variety. Yeah, so it depends. Yeah, but an important part in this contingent variety will be maybe as a kind of minimum criteria still be A and A+ journals, and typically ranked according to the German journal ranking or FT50 or ABS rankings. Yeah. In any case, and I think this is a kind of counterbalance in the whole evaluation procedure at the German Research Foundation, as least as important as the reputation of the PI, yeah, young scholars excluded for the moment, at least as important is the project proposal. Yeah, no matter whether it's a network for young scholars or setting up a graduate school or whatsoever. Yeah, the project proposal is at least as important. Shortly to my second point, open science and open access. I think a lot of lip service is paid to these. Yeah, officially, of course, the German Research Foundation supports these initiatives. Yeah, they even have a high priority. In the evaluation practice, I think they not yet matter so much. Yeah. Especially in my field of management research, I do mainly qualitative methods-based research. Yeah, it's any kind of open science approach is problematic anyhow. Yeah, so I think there's a much more development needed how this could work out. In terms of open access, I'm much more optimistic, especially since major publishing houses, journal publishers have now moved to a different payment modi, yeah, with these deals. So open access will come. But I think open access will only come if related to established journals. Yeah, there's only one exception, and this is a very new journal, Organization Theory, yeah, sponsored by IGOS. And if you like, it's a spin-off of Organization Studies. This will be a different story, I think, because it relies on the reputation of the association IGOS and even more so of the journal Organization Studies. Yeah, but typically new journals, I think, are really hard to start, even if you get finance for an open access mode, because I would always argue it's a path-dependent process, and it's very, very difficult to break the path. Yeah. Finally, my third point, very shortly, standardized reporting systems. I'm afraid they will come, but as many things in my country, we are always late. So we are looking at other countries, how standardization procedures come there. And nevertheless, we tend to imitate many, not really learning from the mistakes of others. So I hope this will change in the future. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Thank you so much, Jörg. This was very, very interesting. Again, before introducing the next panelists, let me also welcome a very important member of the Federation staff, our director for the Office of the Presidents, Professor Patrick Brain-Möller. Welcome, Patrick. And we will now move to Europe as a whole, or at least the European Union as it pertains to the agency that the Union has, the European Research Council. And we have two speakers on behalf of ERC, the ERC. First, Jerko Markovina will speak on behalf of the executive agency, and then Professor Gigerenzer will speak on behalf of the Scientific Council of the Research Center. Jerko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavier, and thanks for inviting me. And as you already said, I'm a scientific officer in the European Research Council executive agency, and I work in the panel SH1, which is Economics, Finance, and Management. So just briefly what the ERC is, it's a funding agency established by the European Commission, and it funds researchers from anywhere in the world, provided their host institution for their research is placed in European Union member countries or in associated countries, which also means that researchers can be hosted in Norway, Israel, and some Eastern European countries which are associated to this program. The ERC program is a part of the European Union Horizon Europe framework program we just started this year. So what is different here is that ERC is funding by bottom-up approach or driven by researcher curiosity. So there are no pre-described priorities or topics. It is driven by researchers. So any idea, whatever it may be, is accepted. All disciplines, all areas are taken into account, and there are no prioritized political or other priorities in these topics. We have three main funding schemes, which are starting grant for early career researchers, which is 2 to 7 years from their PhD. Then consolidator grant for mid-career researchers, which is 7 to 12 years from the PhD, and anyone with more than 12 years since their PhD can apply to advanced grants. All these grants are given for a period of up to 5 years. It can be shorter, but most people take the period of 5 years. And the amounts of these grants that are awarded individually to the individual principal investigator are amounts of starting grant up to 1.5 million euro, then for consolidated 2 million euro, and for advanced grant 2.5 million euro over this 5-year period. So if we look how it was done during these pandemic times, we thankfully have managed to keep all the evaluations going. They were ongoing. Only in the first period of the lockdowns, we had to cancel some online interviews, but otherwise all the evaluations were going on and are still ongoing. We are just now in the procedure of starting grant 2021. So as I said, how the evaluation works is there is one overall general criterion of excellence and two main criteria, which is the research idea itself and the principal investigator. So the research idea itself, which is funded by ERC, is that the research proposed should be groundbreaking and moving the frontiers of science. So as we call it, frontier research. We are not funding incremental research or something that has already been done. The two main words here are this groundbreaking research and high risk, high gain. So panels are encouraged to find risky projects that have some sort of daring component, which may bring high gains in return if it succeeds. Of course, there is a little also possibility of this high risk for the project failure, but this is taken into account. So the idea should be something new, something moving the science in a new direction. The PI evaluation is done not only on publications, they are just a part of the evaluation and not by the numbers, H indexes or citation counts. This is looked at, but the whole PI profile is taken into account, which means also, does the PI have a demonstrated ability to conduct such a groundbreaking or risky research? Does he or she have previous experience in mentoring younger scientists? Do they have the ability to, let's say, organize conferences or scientific events? And all these things are taken into account, also including possible career breaks, such as leaving the academia to work in practice, or paternity, maternity leave, military service, whatever it may be. So the evaluators are taking these, all of this into account when evaluating the PI profile. The main question being, is this the right person to carry this research, this 5-year program of research to the successful completion? What else I would like, of course, the context also depends on the career stage. So in starting grant, you would expect less publications and less other activities than for people who are in advanced grant and have a long established career. The thing about societal impact is not an evaluation criterion here. So ERC is funding basic science. So if the project will have only scientific advances, publications, and new theories, new breakthroughs, this is okay. This is fine with us, and it is not an evaluation criterion ex ante. After the project is finished, ERC has, for some last 5 or 6 years, conducted an ex post evaluation of finished projects. And these have been covered in one article in Science, and you can find on our webpage some more information about that, where independent panel of researchers have evaluated finished projects, and I can just say generally that around 80% of all the funded projects have found some significant scientific advances. Overall, I would say that panel members and evaluators in ERC are actively discouraged by people such as me when we are in the panel evaluations to look at bibliometrics and these impact citation factors as a criterion. It can be used, but in a wider picture of the applicant's achievements, which are again taken into account depending on their career stage. And the last thing I would like to mention is, especially for the management community, which is in the panel with economics and finance, that the budget for each panel is apportioned according to the demand. So more application for a panel, the more money it is being given. So the number of applications in SH1 is among the lowest in social sciences, and we have always been encouraging people to apply, because applying means more money given to the specific area and more grants to be divided. So I would I would encourage you to speak to your communities and to the scientists in management to try to apply to ERC grants, and they will see the procedure, they will get valuable feedback from our evaluators, and they can always try again and gain this funding, which will help their careers, especially in the starting rounds. So I think I would close with that. No, if it's 6 minutes or
a few more, but that's fine. Thank you so much, Erco. Really appreciate it. I already introduced Professor Gigerenzer. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I try to answer your questions in my role as a member of the Science Council of the ERC, but also will add my personal experience. So the Science Council of the ERC consists of 22 members, and it's so the head of the ERC, which decides on the structure of the grants, on the entire organization in a constant feedback. I must say before I start, when I joined the Science Council in the ERC last year, I was impressed about the quality of the minds there, about the internationality, and also about the quality of the executive agency, where Erco is one of the people there. I had not expected seeing such a competent team. So I'll start with question number 3, the DORA declaration. The ERC supports the spirit of the declaration. Whether the ERC will sign it is under consideration, but all practices are already in compliance with DORA. And that basically also means play down impact factors, or maybe better, don't even mention these. And that seems to be appear to contradict what I heard today from France and Italy. That's what I heard. So my personal view is journal impact factors were introduced for libraries, not for measuring quality of research. And an impact factor of a journal is a poor substitute for evaluating the content of a paper. It invites gaming and gives also the wrong signals to our young researchers that surrogates count and names count, not innovative research. So on open science, the ERC fully supports open science and open access publishing. On my personal view, the Max Planck Society, where I'm a member, joined Germany's nationwide project DEAL, which is an important step towards open access at a reasonable pricing of publishing service. So we need to tackle the problem, not only to have open access, but also to stop the big publishing corporations from overcharging us, including libraries. And we need to find a way, and that's often overlooked. It doesn't help a researcher in a, so say, poor country if there is open access and the person can read everything, but cannot pay for its own publication. So we need to find a way out. And just throw out an idea, why not a revolutionary move so that the academic institutions, such as the Royal Society of London or German or other national institutions, think about how to take over the major top journals or create new ones because they're probably not getting the copyright. So an e-nature or an e-science, and at best get the entire board of the researchers over, and in order then offer the publishing companies to do the hard work. But that would be turn the entire business in a non-profit business where science controls science rather than commerce, and would also stop some of the new developments like these very strange journals where nobody knows where they come from, so-called predatory journals. I have also comment on question 4 on the societal value of publications. As Jerko just said, the ERC funds the best quality basic science. And to add, basic science has been the best avenue, in my opinion, for the best applications. For instance, the ERC has funded BioNTech's research on cancer, and it became the key for finding one of the best vaccines against COVID. Another case where good science is leading to unexpected results. And the commitment of the ERC to basic research and not to approve or to do research on some applied topic became, I think, very clear, as some of you maybe remembered last year, early 2020, the Science Council asked its president to resign because we thought he has not understood the goals of the ERC, and the idea was to put part of the funding into topic-related research, such as COVID-19, and which would have just taken away the time from everyone was busy working on vaccines and on medicine. And in that time, researchers in the pandemic need time, not spend their time on writing grant proposals for funding. So that's just one of the, an example for the commitment to basic science. Then the next question was, should we switch away from impact factors as a measure of quality? My personal answer is yes, of course. We need to go back and have science under control of science and not on journals. Committees for hiring and promotion should read the content of the papers, not the impact factors. And there's a simple solution. For instance, a long time ago, when I was with the DFG, so which Jörg Sidov is representing today, working on how to get Germany back on the international stage in psychology, one of the rules we implemented was that applicants for a professorship, for tenure, for any positions, for a grant in DFG, should submit their 5 best paper according to own judgment. And that can be read. You cannot read a list with 100 papers. So there are very clear signs that we can set to get away from looking at surrogate numbers into really asking the question, is there innovation in this paper? The last question on standardized reporting systems. So I'm personally very hesitant, and also the ERC recommends very clearly that the panels and the panel chairs look at each individual case by themselves and not just on numbers. And also, a standardized reporting system has the danger that it's been done by administrators, and we get more and more universities run anyhow by administrators and no longer by scientists. And I would like to hear Madeleine Barrow's experience and also our British colleagues on the British attempt to administrate and standardize science. And at least Peter Higgs, the 2013 Nobel laureate in physics, that he would not have gotten tenure in the system, in the British system today. And he became an embarrassment to his department when they did research assessment exercise. In my opinion, one big idea in one life is better than 100 mediocre publications. We don't need more papers. We have too many. And that decreases quality because as a reviewer, I just get too many papers. I can't review them anymore. And many of us feel like that. So let me close with first a reminder on how the ERC works. So if the management community thinks they're getting too little grants, then there's a simple solution: submit more. The ERC budget is appointed according to demand. So more applications, more money, apply. And also a final word, I think the general problem of our publishing work today is that we need to get control of publishing back into the hands of science, the scientific institutions, and also do everything that research is evaluated by its content, by its innovation, not by impact factors or even alt metrics, such as the number of tweets. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Gigerenzer. So I will take the opportunity now, given that really these webinars are more like roundtables and obviously limited by the 2 hours that we have, I think I would like to make 4 observations at this point. The first one, I think that it's so fitting that Professor Stefan Guldenberger, who is the Vice President for Practice for the European Academy of Management and one of my colleagues in the Executive Committee of EURAM, join us as Professor Gigerenzer spoke, representing the Council of the European Research Center. So welcome, Stefan. Really happy to see you.
Me too. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So my 3 actual content observations resonate a lot with what Professor Gigerenzer and others have already observed. First of all, the economic model of our field, and in particular, the economic model of the financial model of research, production, and publication. And this was clearly mentioned and summarized in our conversation letter for the 3rd webinar, the one which preceded this one, with the publishers and the editors-in-chief of several journals. We are doing the work, we, the academics, are doing the work for free, and the publishers are monetizing, making profits out of our free work. So there is definitely something there that resonates very strongly with what Professor Gigerenzer said about retransforming the current for-profit system into a not-for-profit system, actually, as he said, maybe governed by scientists. And this is, I guess, a call for regaining some autonomy for the scientific community, which obviously one could also challenge because, and this is moving to my second observation from the discussion, is that as several speakers, Professor Dali, but also Professor Sido, the academic, or let's say the system for evaluating the academic scientific contribution of research has moved to the use of these metrics that, as some of you said, were devised more for libraries, but that because they are easy measures to use, they become so dominant and they are gamed. And they have triggered an exponential increase, probably not just because they can be gamed, but because there is a pressure for gaming them, which is the diffusion of the tenure system based on publications of this kind. So this is related to the conversation that we had with the university presidents and deans in the second webinar, which is the current incentive system in management schools and in universities at large. And the third and last observation that I wanted to make and to reflect as we hear in the last panelists before hopefully having 30 minutes for dialogue refers to the actual point, a question that Henry Cormack raised and Andrew Jack actually asked in the chat. So thank you so much, Andrew, for always being here and really participating, which is actually this current demand for assessing the societal and managerial relevance or impact of our research beyond its scientific value seems to be going towards a demand for measurement, for quantification. May we find ourselves the same problems that beyond feasibility, as Andrew is asking in the chat, beyond its feasibility of actually being able to find a metric. But if we did find a metric, will we not find ourselves again in the same problem that we are finding ourselves for scientific evaluation? That the existence of particular measures might drive behavior to the detriment of a more holistic understanding of research. So these were, I think, three observations from the discussion that we have had so far, and also building on the prior webinars before going back to the Mediterranean, to the south, in this case to Africa. And I'm delighted that we have a speaker from Tunisia. Let me, before turning the floor to Alketa to introduce our next panelist, let me take also this opportunity to welcome Professor Wefek Kilif, originally from Tunisia and Vice President from the Association for Accounting in Tunisia, and also a member of our council. So, Alketa.
Thank you, Xavier. So now we welcome Imen Kanchel from Tunisia.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar dealing with very interesting subject. Donc, let me introduce myself. I am Imen Kanchel, professor of finance at the University of Manouba, Tunisia. I belong to the National Committee for the Evaluation of Scientific Research Activity, CNEARS, in Tunisia. CNEARS is made up of 10 full professors from different fields. The CNEARS is dependent on the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, but it is an independent body as in other countries. So, a self-assessment form for university laboratory is available. The criteria on which the evaluation is carried out are public. For CNEARS is responsible for evaluating scientific research activities related to projects, and their results. It also evaluates public research institutions. The committee defines the appropriate criteria, methods, and evaluation procedure as part of its mission. For each evaluation, it makes a recommendation that will achieve greater efficiency of resources and procedures, and a better match between the affected resources and results achieved. I will deal about some questions First, the current situation of evaluating scientific research in management in this pandemic times. The evaluation of scientific research in management has led to the acceptance of the creation of several research laboratories in the field and dealing with topical topics. Several research unities have been converted into a post-assessment research laboratory. Several federal research projects with issues related to the COVID have been accepted. The evaluation of several research centers. Moreover, for the beginning of the pandemic in March, the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research in Tunisia, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, felt that it was necessary to launch a call for project for the research world to contribute to solutions to fight the pandemic. The call for project concerns several themes: the diagnostic team, treatment, synthesis, modeling, prevention, and prototypes. We received 40 relevant projects, 11 projects were selected. Now I will deal with types, format, and dimension of scientific research in management considered in Tunisia. In Tunisia, research papers are the most considered format. The dimension of scientific management research considered are those that meet national priorities. For the actual focus for the CNEARS, more emphasis is on several elements. First, the impact of international publication, and the SGR ranking is the most adopted. The criterion of the theme, we can deal with scientific relevance, clarity of research, problem, coherence with national priorities. The quality of the proposed projects, we can deal with scientific quality, expected results, expected socio-economic benefits, and the quality of proposed socio-economic partner. The hash index is also so important. Moreover, the complementarity of the proposed teams, presence of interdisciplinary projects, the existence of national and international projects, convention, research and development, team visibility, websites, conferences, and symposia. All are the most important criteria for CNEARS. For the future focus, more emphasis should be placed on research and innovation, which have greater potential for the development of the economy, society, well-being, and sustainable development. Let me know now about focus on national indicator. 23,000 research teachers are in the public sector with 245,000 students. So we have about 1 teacher for 11 students, which is a good level of supervision. And for those 23,000 research, we have 565 laboratory and research centers. This means that Tunisia is well equipped in terms of scientific research compared to other countries, especially in Africa. Some focus on international indicators. Tunisia is an associate partner in the European Horizon 2020 projects. Who says associate partner says a lot of project field. Tunisia is one of few countries outside the European Union to have been associated with such projects. We have more than 60 projects accepted and millions of euros released. This is to say that Tunisia has taken a very good step in terms of scientific research. So according to the Global Innovation Index conducted by the World Intellectual Property Organization each year, Tunisia is 65th in the world and has gained 5 places compared to last year. On international indicator, we can add that Tunisia is the second largest in the world in terms of science and engineering graduated by contribution to the population. Tunisia is 30 in the 30 in the world in terms of publication, in terms of GDP, which is testament to the great commitment of teachers. In the section of human potential and research, Tunisia occupies the 38th place. Let me now deal about quality of scientific management and the division improve societal value of publication. By using the international ranking such as the Time Higher Education Impact ranking based on the performance of university in their contribution to the achievement of the social sustainable development goals. Some Tunisian universities are well ranked. For example, we are in the top 400 globally, in the top 200 at the level of quality education and health and well-being, in the top 300 at the level peace, justice, and institution, and partnership for sustainable development goals. Let me close about the quality of scientific management publication and their diffusion improve. The citable document related to the hash index in Tunisia has a lower place and is placed 69th. The Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research has put in place a range of action to improve the quality of publication and their impact. Final word, I do not recommend abandoning the impact factor of journal to assess their scientific quality, which gives some visibility for Tunisian research. And thank you for your attention.
Shukran. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Professor Kanchel. Very interesting description of the system in Tunisia. And in agreement with my co-chair, Alketa Pecci, we would like to take advantage of the fact that we have made quite a bit of effort to get a representation from the different continents. And for Africa, we have the privilege, as I mentioned before, of having with us today the president of the Africa Academy of Management, David Zuga, who knows well the Anglophone Africa situation. So if he would like to share a few words, please, I think that we can stay in the continent. It will be great at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Xavier. And thank you all. As Xavier just mentioned, I'm just going to offer a few comments because I didn't I didn't know I was going to speak at this session. So I didn't prepare thoroughly, I would say. But it's my comments are based on the research I do on the Africa management in general, and discussions with colleagues on the continent. Summarize it, I would say it's the research evaluation in Africa, particularly Anglophone Africa at the moment. Okay, let me just say it's outward looking. Outward looking, I mean, the universities tend to see or adopt standards of the West. That's as simple as that. And so whatever mechanisms that are used in the West, those are the ones that they try to imitate, even though they don't have the same quality mechanisms that would enable them compete, so to speak, in that sphere. The AABS is the Association of Business School Deans in Africa. For instance, they use standards, or they were trying to go with AACSB standards and EQUI standards and other standards, but they realized that those standards are not good for them. So they decided to develop their own standards for member organizations. I think at the moment, those standards are still on the drawing board. I think they have been completed, but they have not been adopted and kind of shared across the continent. So they are not at the moment mechanisms that gauge education, quality education standards for management and business schools. And that is because in general, Africa, as a result of the history, colonialism, the educational system is basically Eurocentric. So all Anglophone universities try to follow the colonial masters, so to speak. And questions of whether it is good or not, as we have discussed here, is kind of implicitly acknowledged that it's not healthy, but having the courage to come up with alternatives that has been lacking. The courage to come up with alternatives have been lacking because the thinking is that if they come up with their own one, that would not be accepted. I liked Jerenza's suggestion very much, but given the, if I would call it, unfortunate role of Africa, Africa would just have to imitate what the others have been doing. In other words, if Europe says we are going this way or the West says we are going this way, then Africa would follow. And sad as it is the reality. Until Africa is autonomous in the real sense, I'm not sure there is something using Hoff's language that Africa can uniquely bring to the conversation. Because at the moment, everything is essentially imitative. The potential to offer something unique is there. Unfortunately, it hasn't been explored. So that is what I can share. At the moment, I'm advocating for a change in that, particularly revision of the reconfiguration of the business education system in the entire continent of Africa. And I'm hoping that at least some people would buy the idea. But as of now, sorry to say, it's the same problem we are having because we are just following the West. And that's all I have to say. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't have to apologize, David. It's indeed, it's impromptu. I asked you as the meeting was progressing, so I truly appreciate your spontaneous and prepared contribution, but you know very well, not only the Anglophone Africa, but for those who do not know, the Africa Academy of Management, it's one of the affiliates of the Academy of Management, and David actually sits in the United States of America, and so he knows very well also the US system. Again, with the agreement of Alketa, and we understand that this is reducing a little bit the time for dialogue. So again, I would like to encourage everyone to use the chat. If you have ideas on how to answer the questions that have been raised, or ideas or opinions about the proposals which have been made, please do express them in the chat because we will reflect them in our summary also. Again, we have limited time for the session. And before going to America as a continent, and in particular to Brazil, we also are taking the advantage to take this time to give voice to other participants who are with us today. And we have the chance, we made a lot of effort together also with Professor Li Lu, but with other members of the council, particularly our past president, Professor Yang Zhan from China, to get Asian representatives, but it's always challenging. And so given that Professor Li Lu is active in different Asian countries, including Thailand, I thought that it might be good to give him a few minutes to also, in an impromptu way, share his assessment of the current situation of the countries that he knows. Thank you, Lee.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends where you are. I'm in Thailand, and I was born in Taiwan. Last 20 years, I visit China very frequently. And now I have a full-time job at the Assumption University in Bangkok. So I will share some of my understanding subjectively. In China, there are schools ranking, let's say within 100 ranking schools, their faculty must publish their articles on the SCI or SSCI. And also for top 20 schools, I assume they all got AACSB for their management, school of management, school of business, and not all of them. And I would say probably 50 got European standard, which is MBAR, AMBA. So even by giving you information, their standards are not that high, but government is pushing their faculties. They must publish their articles on the SCI or SSCI or SCI Expand. And there are thousands of journals, in average, like 9,000, in total 9,000 journals for SCI Expand, covers 177 disciplines. So in average, like 50 journals cover one discipline. Almost the same situation for SCI, 3,000 journals cover 57 or 50 plus disciplinaries. That's China's situation. For their government, they have central government, provincial government, and city level government, municipal. They all offer grants to encourage professors, whether they are young or they're senior, to conduct research. And that's the most important things. It's more important than their teaching load or responsibilities. So many professors, they are complaining. And in Thailand, the university here are lower rank compared to most of the Western academic system. So here, our PhD students, they are allowed to publish the dissertation on Scopus. And also Thai government has tier 1 and tier 2 journals. If they can get acceptance and they can be graduated, because even we knew there are so many journals, but each journal has their own preferred themes. So for the candidate, if they want to be graduate to fulfill the requirement to publish journal articles, sometimes they have to wait 1 year up to 2 years. So I think probably this is one of the Ministry of Education of Thailand. They want to help the student here in Thailand so they can be graduate faster. So in our program, we encourage our students, if they can publish journal article before they defend their final dissertation, and we can waive their final dissertation defense. But so far, nobody achieved this this reward yet. And this is what I can share with you, because last seminar, I had invited two of our professors who are in charge the journal editor. So they have more knowledge than myself. And today I got a call, so I just share what I know. This is all subjective from myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Really appreciate it. And so now, back to you, Alketa.
So I'll present some brief reflection about our form of evaluation, and also I took some notes about all the meetings. So I'll try to use it to wrap up our discussion here. So in Brazil, we also have a mix of governmental oversight of research evaluation with self-regulation. The Brazilian system reminds a little bit of the French system. So it's not by chance. I think our Napoleonic systems of law, etc., inspired the regulation of both systems probably. But I think all the trends that we've seen here independently of the context are currently in play in Brazil. So we have our own journal metrics. We developed the system, it's called Qualis, which ranks journals and measures journals' impact, not just by using Web of Science or Scopus, etc., but they own our own journals. So it tries to mix both models, international journals with national journals. Of course, the challenge of the system nowadays is how do you evaluate more than 200 programs that are in place in Brazil in management, being a Master of Science or PhD programs. So we have a huge number of programs. And when it comes to evaluation in big numbers, I think the question of what is measured is what matters makes a difference. So I do think that all of us recognize the limits of impact factors of the journals, etc., as a good metrics for research quality. But the problem that I see in place is that this is one of the metrics that we have that is comparable and it's usable. So governments worldwide depend on it because it's one of the unique matters that allows you to establish a ranking. Of course, we are also questioning the evaluation. So the new system moved toward more subjective forms of evaluation. So program they have to report. However, I have to say the Brazilian system is very what I call a Kafkanian system of regulation, because we have to fulfill reports and there are online systems and programs, etc., that program coordinator needs to fulfill with a lot of information from the procedures, how you deal with your students, how many classes do you take, where do they work, etc. But it's moving toward a more subjective form. Probably Claudia can talk about, a little bit more about the new evaluation metrics in Brazil, if we call it, if we can call about metrics. I would like to kind of wrap up with my sum of reflection. I think this idea of there is a mimetic pressure worldwide is very clear in our talk today. And I do think that it's not just an African problem. I think it's a worldwide problem. I would like to remember that we are imitating the US system of publication, which is not governmental at all. It's a market-based system. It's based on journal rankings in Web of Science, etc. And the editorial market plays, of course, a huge role on that. But I see a mimetic pressure worldwide. with difference that I think what are very good example of how to resist the system. We kind of all of us go in the direction of impact factors because I tend to believe that it's a measurable factor. And the problem is that we, as we face in Brazil, that as long as we connect impact factors with incentives, institutional or individual incentives, we'll have difficulty to face the problem. Here in Brazil, for example, the publication, the rankings, etc., punish the programs. What I mean by punishment is less public funding or less private funding. And the same can be said about the individual researchers. Individual researchers are punished if they don't publish in those systems. So the real challenge here is disconnecting the measurement from the reward or punishment system that are in place. And the very logic of if we need to punish, or do you need to come up with something different in terms of system of evaluations? It looks to me, I'm trying to gather some good practices. External criteria look to be a substitute, look as a good substitute for objective measurement and evaluation. So I picked up some ideas, the relational with SDGs. So how do you connect research with SDGs? How do you connect research with national plan of development when they are in place? I mean, I talk from a country where we don't have at the moment the national plan of development, but this is a good idea. External peer review, this is something very interesting. Also, I do believe that by external reviewer, not self-regulation, not depending a lot on self-regulation, we can have more diversified view of what is a good research and how the good research can build better system of evaluation. Also, I also like very much the Italian experience on the focus of reputation. This is because you don't build reputation in one evaluation, in one term evaluation. And in Brazil, in my country, we tend to have, like 3 years or 4 long-term evaluation process. What does it mean? It means that you basically start from zero in the new evaluation. So that good paper that you've done that is highly revolutionary in your field, it doesn't matter in the next evaluation because you basically start from zero. So we don't measure history. We don't measure how what I'm calling here reputation, which is very important indeed to have, a more thorough evaluation of our research impact, that you don't, as a matter of fact, you don't build impact in 1 year or 2 years or even 3 years of the evaluation spectrum that the governmental agency tried to impose on the programs, individual researcher, academic programs, professional-oriented programs, or whatever might be depending on the context. So I would like to hear more about what are your thoughts about how can we disconnect measures based on impact factor from reward or punishment system, incentive system that are in place in each country, because I do think that this might be a form of, instead of just criticizing and all of us agreeing about this critique, of moving forward with actual proposals of improving our research evaluation. So maybe Claudia can talk a little bit more about Brazilian experience, new form at least.
Yeah, I just want to add a brief comment about our evaluation in Brazil. We've been discussing about intellectual contribution, social impact, which is quite new at CAPES in Brazil. But I think you're following the international accreditation agencies as ICSB. So you have to think about relevance in matters of what kind of change we reach for, and what kind of change will impact in society. And I think stop this question about publishing or perishing, but think about our own reality and what's most important for us to make changes that we need to promote or at least to inspire to start in some level. And I think the academic community has a key role in this mission that discuss relevance and matters of what really is important for not only the academic society, but also the community in general. I think that's all, just a small comment that I want to add to Alqueta's speech. Thank you.
Muito obrigado to both of you. I think this is really great. Actually, very much so in the second webinar with university presidents and deans, Dean I.D. Kessner, sorry, from the Kelley School of Business in Indiana, at Indiana University, and a board member of AACSB, indeed mentioned the two new standards that AACSB added precisely, as you were referring to, Claudia, on societal impact very recently. I feel that we would need at least 2 more hours to now engage in a dialogue on the whether we actually converge in the diagnosis, which I think we do to some extent, and then also, as Alqueta was very much saying, to address the possible solutions to the problems identified. Unfortunately, we do not dare to schedule a 4-hour webinar, but we might. We are also quite daring at IFSAM already in just bringing this series of webinar about this very important and central issue of our field and our contribution to broader society. In a prior webinar, particularly the one with university presidents and deans, they took twice as much as the time that they were supposed to have, surprisingly. And so I'm actually thinking about offering a variation on the formula that we came up with to actually have inputs about possible solutions further discussed. So as the panelists know, we have the IFSAM conversation letters, which usually contain 2 articles, one by the co-chairs with the help of the Deputy Secretary, Elisa Martinelli, summarizing the main contributions during the panel, during the webinar. But we invite other articles, usually there's at least 1, but there can be more. So I would like to extend the invitation, which was already made to the panelists, to other participants in this webinar, and there are many leaders of the profession also in the webinar. If they would like to contribute, even short commentary, like we had Andrew Jack commentary in the 3rd webinar, and Amanda Wilson, an editor of Wiley, also kind of on a bullet kind of style, to comment on the webinar, you are more than welcome to do so. And if so, please do contact with the permission, I guess, of our Deputy Secretary, Elisa Martinelli. I think she will be the person to contact. So maybe Elisa, if you could provide your email in the chat, it would be great. And in addition to this, actually what we did with the university presidents and deans was that to offer them to react on 3 or 4 questions. And this is what, in addition to your own commentary, which will be welcome as such, but I think that taking also the contributions that Alqueta made, I think that there are 3 critical questions that I would invite, the panelists in particular, if they could actually react in writing, emailing us back. So obviously I will write those questions, but just let me mention them. So I think the first one is really the question that Alqueta was raising. How can we disentangle, disconnect the system of measurement based on impact factor and citations from the tenure, the recruitment, I would say, and the tenure or promotion system? And in that line, I think that the issue is that if we adopt the Professor Gigerenzer's proposal that I've advocated also for a few years, which is let's read our colleagues' work and exert our professional judgment and not delegate it. Why do we need commissions of faculty if it's about counting? We don't need a commission. We can just count and that's it, right? But if we read, is this feasible? Is this feasible? Can we ask our colleagues really to read all the materials? And I think more importantly, the critique that some colleagues have raised to this proposal is, will we not fall into the clanning behavior that used to characterize most universities in the past, that like on a kind of promoting the own people who are already within the organization? That would be the first question. The second question is, again, taking on Professor Gigerenzer's provocative suggestion. Should we create our own journals, completely separate from the money-making publishers? And in that regard, we have some examples. Professor Isabelle Bouty, the president of AIMS, this organization has its own journal, Management. So is this a model which is feasible? There'll be probably a lot of resistance for the existing top journals, the status quo, which, however, most of them are actually owned by scholarly associations, which are members of this federation. And the third question is the one that I kind of raised before: should we adopt metrics, standardized metrics, for the measurement of societal impact? Seeing the consequences of the diffusion of standardized metrics for the academic contribution, is it a good idea to engage in this effort of creating metrics for societal impact? So I would like to offer these three questions to the panelists and others if they want to address them, and we will be very happy to collect them and publish them in our next conversation letter. Alketa is sharing, indeed, Ampat has its own 2 journals. Thank you so much, Alketa. So there are several associations which are autonomous in that sense. It's for
a quick
sure.
note. Brazil as a large open science system based on open science journals, etc., all free of charge, all funded by the government. So we have a huge system of publicly funded journals. However, I can say it's very hard to compete with an international ranking of journals. It's hard to get in the Web of Science, Scopus, etc., because of the Portuguese issue. Many of them are switching to English, and when they switch to English, they lose the local market. So, I mean, we have experiences in open science more than Ampat, I need to say more. It's a governmental experience in open science.
Thank you so much. So I'm cognizant it's now 4:30 Central European Standard Time. So it's a time to conclude this webinar. I would really would like to thank deeply all the panelists for being here, for sharing their thoughts, for having prepared for this session, and all the other participants. I think it's been extremely interesting. We will try to do our best in summarizing the insights, but please do volunteer for the commentary if you're really motivated and have ideas. That we take all kinds of ideas, even if they are radical and provocative. We actually want to spark creativity and innovation in the spirit of the World Creativity and Innovation Day that we recently celebrated this week on the 21st. And today is the World Book Day, and it's in my home country in Catalonia. It's a very special day. It's St. George's Day, and we celebrate with roses and books being given to each other in couples. So on that note, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your commentaries.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.